Hi, Keri. How are you today?
Wonderful. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really good. First, I just want to thank you for taking the time to just sit down for a few minutes with me and share this conversation about what you are doing with the Dentistry Advisory Council. Because just like we have previously talked about, this is really important work that a lot of people will be able to benefit from. And so I'm really excited to get into that with you. So just to begin, could you just maybe start by telling us just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into this field, and what it's been like for you?
Okay. Well, I am fairly new in counseling. I've only been in practice for a little over a year. Prior to that, I was a teacher for 20 years. And I loved being a teacher so much, but so many of the things that the children needed had to do with mental health, and you couldn't do as much in the context of the classroom. So when I decided to make a shift to a new career, I decided to go further into that love of helping people with their mental health. Um, it's been a whole big journey for me because it's been something that I've struggled with some anxiety. So it was helpful for me to learn some tools myself. I did pass it on to my kids as well. And so that was another piece of it, was learning, oh, how do I help them? And then finding out how we all got our help and then being there to help others on their journey as well.
Oh, wonderful. That sounds so inspiring too, because I like what I've read that for us to really learn things, it's helpful for us to teach them to others. And so I can imagine
Mm-hmm.
that it just made sense to, like, as you unfolded your own journey, to move forward with helping other people with the same issues. Um, so as we kind of go forward, I'm just wondering, a little more about what it is that you feel is uniquely suited to connect with people in the dentistry field.
Okay. Well, the dentistry field is an interesting field because it's a very high stress profession. Um, the overall industry can be a stressful place to be. The expectations are high. You're dealing with a clientele that often has high levels of anxiety. Then there's the financial pressure of having to be up to date on all these equipment that are very expensive. The early cost of the education, which is exponential as well and rising right now, um, but also the stress of taking care of a whole office staff. And it's such a stressful field because of all these different pieces, and it often falls to the dentist. And they are often isolated in their field because they work in smaller practices where there's only one or two and they're seeing patients all the time. So there's not a lot of support for all these challenges.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of really good points, things that I hadn't actually really considered before. Um, so what are some things that you see very common to just working with your clients? Maybe like if you just have three primary things that you can see and things that you would offer in response to those issues.
The things that I see most frequently, they're real common, are stress, anxiety, and depression. And for stress, it's all about learning how to manage stress and minimize stress. So the first things we do are really attack how can you minimize your stress, but the stress that's still left that you cannot change, how do you manage that better so you're healthier and happier? Anxiety, it's how do we work with that anxiety and use our tools while learning how to diminish that anxiety? So it's very similar to stress, and but different overall problems. And when it comes to depression, it's finding your hope again, getting back
Mm.
to those things that you love. And people often isolate and go into themselves when all the things they love are outside and they start to lose those little pieces. So finding those pieces and putting it back together.
Mm. Wow. And that sounds like a lot of work.
It can be, but everyone has their joy and has things they can do to change. It's a matter of figuring out what they are for each individual.
Yeah. So what do you feel like with that, what makes you different as a provider than say other people in your field?
Um, Everyone's so unique in my field, and one of the things that I think I do well in my field is pay attention to all the context, because there's so much inside ourselves, but then when you consider how the influences of our family, our career, our community, overall society, the expectations surrounding us from all those different places, how that plays into what's going on in the individual's world. So looking at the context, whether it be the very broad context or more narrow context, to gain a better understanding of that person's real world and what they need to make it a happier, healthier place for them.
That's so helpful, just providing like a perspective that I think a lot of people probably struggle with feelings of guilt and shame when they're working through these things. And so trying to remember too that we're not actually responsible for everything that has happened in our lives. Like it might not be, it might be your family of origin, it might be the cultural background that you come from, or whatever it is that's feeding into the internal experience that we struggle with. That's so helpful. Thank you so much for that, Keri. So with things in the world always changing and us always having to adapt, just forecasting if you can in this coming year, because we're at the end of a year right now, moving forward. What kind of things do you foresee being special challenges for clients here this coming year?
Forecasting is so hard now because the last couple of years have all been so wild and unpredictable. But I think some things that we can count on are increased stress levels, increased anxiety levels, and some people having a lot more trouble accessing resources, whether it be to mental health care or medical care. But I think for the dental field in particular, because there's such a rise in general anxiety and medical anxiety, I think dentists are really going to see a lot more anxiety in clients, in addition to financial woes that they're having, adding to that anxiety.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And the simple fact that, like you said, everything is so unpredictable. Like if we've learned anything from the last 3 years, it's maybe just learning how to be present with what we have right now, and not letting the imagination create more chaos for us.
Absolutely. That's a big piece of it, is understanding what we can control, what we can influence, and finding a way to adapt to what we can't and let go of some of the things that we can't control that we want to control.
Yeah. Oh, so thinking on that, about what can we do and what can we not do, what kind of things, if you had just like a few suggestions that would be helpful for just about anybody listening to this or watching this, what kind of tools or skills or practices could you recommend that would be helpful for everyone?
Well, my number one go-to that is free, but some people kind of buck up against, is meditation. Meditation is a tool that's accessible to anyone, and finding a way to give yourself time and space to be calm and reconnect with your mind and body. And I know that yoga is a big piece of it too, but sometimes you can't fit in a full practice. You can always fit in a 5-minute meditation. But beyond that, just for your own personal self-care, is resting. Everyone needs rest. You can't really attack your problems or work through situations if you're not giving yourself the time to rest. It's a priority, and it needs to not be looked at as I'm being lazy or I'm not taking care of stuff. You're taking care of yourself. And that looks different for everyone, but that's a big thing. And the other piece of it is learning to let go of the things you can't control and finding some acceptance in that.
That's really helpful. Wow, that's so much to just be able to take in and just put legs to the recommendation. Thank you so much for that. I'm just thinking over if there's anything else that you wanted to add or anything you would like to say that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, well, I do want to add, I make it sound real simple, like, oh, just do a little meditation, make sure you're resting, and then let go of what you can't control. And it really does minimize the difficulty, but it's all possible. It's all within our reach. And those little changes can make really big differences.
Wow. Yes, you're absolutely right. And that has been my personal experience as well, is just doing small things over a course of time and make big changes. Well, Keri, I want to say again, thank you so much for again taking the time just to sit down and share just a little bit about yourself and what you're doing with the Dentistry Advisory Council and how your services can greatly impact the foundation of what they are doing with their practices, their home life, and what they're building in this world, because it is important, it's significant, and I just want to say thank you again and for doing the work that you're doing, because it's so important.
And thank you so much for inviting me here today and giving me an opportunity to speak to this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.